did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know, Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Dawn Neeson and Emily Carver. And today we have Starmer doubles down. The Labour leader says he stands by every word of a Labour Party advert that accuses Rishi Sunak of not wanting child abusers to go to jail, and that he makes absolutely zero apologise for being blunt. But no matter how squeamish it might make some people feel, but could this backfire?
Rishi Sunak has called for a return to power sharing in Northern Ireland. As he marks 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement, it comes ahead of a visit by US President Joe Biden tomorrow.
Indeed, and the biggest ever rise in state pension kicks in today. The record-breaking 10.1% increase will still not keep pace with inflation, though, which unexpectedly rose to 10.4% last month.
Travelling in style, the King and Queen consort will head to the Coronation in a coach with air conditioning, electric windows and state-of-the-art suspension. We'll have all the details of the Coronation route and discuss the issue of ivory. Let us know your thoughts on all our talking points today. As always, you can email us both at gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll get stuck into all the top stories in just one moment, but first, let's get the news headlines.
Hello, good morning. It's 9:31. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB Newsroom. Here are the headlines. The Prime Minister is calling for the return of the Stormont Assembly as he marks the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Ahead of a visit to Northern Ireland, Rishi Sunak wants to see power sharing restored and is urging politicians to get on with the business of governance. He's also praised the bravery of the leaders who secured the deal. The Prime Minister will host US President Joe Biden in Belfast tomorrow to commemorate the event. Former leader of the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland, Lord John Allardyce, says differences must be resolved.
Negotiating in the middle of and after a huge, long, violent campaign is far more difficult than the process of negotiating now. We should be able to overcome the problems of the moment because they're not in the context of a violent terrorist campaign. And people need to remember that was the biggest difficulty we faced, and it's not a difficulty we have to face in the same way now.
NHS England says emergency care will be prioritised during the junior doctors' strike in what is described as the most disruptive industrial action in NHS history. The health body says 4 days of walkouts over pay will mean cancelling appointments and operations is unavoidable. The strikes will run from tomorrow until Saturday. People receiving the state pension will see their payments increase by 10.1% from today. The increase has been confirmed by Chancellor Jeremy Hunt in his November 2022 autumn statement. Depending on the pension, weekly payments will rise to either £156.20 or £203.85. TV, online, radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Dawn and Emily.
Good morning and welcome to The Point on Easter Monday. I'm Dawn Neeson. It's Emily Carver is with me. Right, OK, let's get straight on, shall we? Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he's making absolutely zero apologies for the ad campaign that has provoked anger from within his own party, regardless of how squeamish it makes people.
From initially accusing the Prime Minister of thinking child sex abusers shouldn't go to prison, Labour followed up with ads on adults convicted of firearms possession and theft.
And as we've just heard in breakfast, Emily Thornby, it said we're going to double down even more on it.
Well, quite.
Right. For more we can bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Good morning, Tom. Right, OK, we've just heard Emily Thornby talking to the breakfast programme this morning and saying there are more of these adverts to come. So what do we make of this?
Yes, this is the new attack dog strategy from the Labour Party. We can expect more of this sort of campaigning, particularly in the run-up to the local elections, really going after Rishi Sunak as an individual and making some claims that really do stretch the realms of credibility in terms of Rishi Sunak's personal involvement, particularly around criminal justice issues. Of course, Rishi Sunak became a Member of Parliament in 2015. The sentencing guidelines the advert discusses were set in 2012. Now, Rishi Sunak was not involved in setting those guidelines, but someone who was, ironically, was Sir Keir Starmer, who was, of course, Director of Public Prosecutions at the time, sat on the Sentencing Guidelines Council that actually delivered the guidelines that mean that not every rapist has an automatic prison sentence. And this is where we get into some difficulty for the Labour Party, because they put out these sort of punchy adverts criticising the government, and it's true to say that the government could change these sentencing guidelines. It's a fair point to make. Many people up and down the country would think that this is a country that has got too soft on crime. However, when we look at the Labour Party's own record on this, and particularly the record of Sir Keir Starmer, it doesn't really stand up that he is someone that can make these sort of claims. After all, it was Emily Thornby who, back around a decade ago, actually wrote to Sir Keir Starmer, who was then the Director of Public Prosecutions, saying that he should toughen up these guidelines, which he refused to do. So I think there's a lot about Sir Keir Starmer's past as Director of Public Prosecutions with regard to setting some of these sentencing guidelines that actually could be in for more scrutiny. It's a bit of shaky ground for the Labour Party to be standing on if they're accusing this current government of being weak on crime, when actually, quite often, it's those people who now sit in the shadow cabinet who drew up those guidelines.
I mean, it does seem like they have set a rather low bar for election campaigning. It may well get vicious in the months to come, in the weeks to come. Northern Ireland, 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Rishi Sunak has called on Stormont politicians to get on with the business of government. How's it looking?
He has indeed, and it's quite notable, in fact, that in Joe Biden's 3-day visit to Northern Ireland, starting on Tuesday, one place he will not visit, he's of course visiting the Northern Ireland and the Republic, one place he will not visit is Stormont, the seat of government for Northern Ireland, because of course there has not been an executive government in Northern Ireland for getting on for 2 years now. It's an extraordinary situation. Rishi Sunak using this opportunity again to call for the DUP to re-enter power sharing. Of course, the Windsor framework passed through Parliament, the most significant bit of it passed through Parliament a few weeks ago, and the further statutory instruments and everything else are being delivered by government now. Although it does seem unlikely that the DUP will re-enter power sharing, at least this side of the local elections. Perhaps considerations will change after that point. But yes, Joe Biden being greeted by Rishi Sunak in Northern Ireland tomorrow on the start of a 3-day visit, not only visiting Northern Ireland, but also going back to some of the ancestral places of Biden's claimed Irish heritage in the Republic.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. We'll catch up with you later in the show. But joining us now is the former First Minister of Northern Ireland and GB News presenter, Dame Arlene Foster. Hello, there you are. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Where are we? Do we need to recommit to the principles of the agreement at this stage?
Well, it's interesting you should say the principles of the agreement, because often people misrepresent what is actually in the Belfast Agreement. And I see Richie Neal, a very high-profile friend of Joe Biden, doing exactly that again today when he's talking about the fact that the United States are co-guarantors of the Belfast Agreement, which of course they aren't, and talking about the principles of the agreement as opposed to what's actually in the agreement. You know, it took a very long time to get the Belfast Agreement agreed. It took a long time because it's a very complex piece of work. But since then, people have misrepresented what's actually in the Belfast Agreement, and that brought us the difficulties that we had after Brexit, and indeed the current difficulties with the protocol and with the Windsor framework. But despite all of that, I think people will want to mark the Belfast Agreement. This is the actual date that the agreement was signed, on the 10th of April 1998. And whilst, of course, the IRA at that time were being infiltrated and were being defeated by the security services here in Northern Ireland, we do want to mark the fact that we don't live in a Northern Ireland with violence and terrorism on a daily basis. But, you know, peace is not just the absence of terrorism. It's also the absence of the threat of terrorism. And unfortunately, we still have a very small number of Republicans that continue to threaten the Northern Ireland peace. And you will know that over this weekend, the police have said that they are very concerned about attacks, particularly on police officers and their families.
Arlene, I'm interested you brought up the fact that, you know, there are still attacks going on, and obviously there was a police officer, John Caldwell, who was shot, and I read over the weekend of a 12-year-old girl who was beaten up by other 12-year-old girls, and that was sectarian violence again creeping in. Now, you've lived through this. We're all talking about the 25th anniversary and sort of like the political side of it. I just wonder if you could give us a feel of what it was actually like 25 years ago before this agreement came into place. Just how hard was it for the people of Northern Ireland?
Well, I think one of the difficulties with the Belfast Agreement and one of the omissions is that there hasn't been enough concentration on reconciliation. And I interviewed Bertie Ahern, who was the Irish Prime Minister at the time of the Belfast Agreement, and he very clearly said one of the things he wished we'd spent more time on was on reconciliation and dealing with the legacy of what happened during those 30 years of violence and terrorism. And one of the reasons why I voted against the Belfast Agreement, actually, Dawn, was the fact that the terrorists were allowed to leave prison in 1998, but there was very little consideration given to the victims of terrorism and to those people who had suffered the most during those dark days. And indeed, as you both know, we're still dealing with the legacy of what happened in Northern Ireland, and the government is bringing forward a bill which, as you know, is controversial in terms of dealing with the legacy of the past. But if that had been dealt with 25 years ago, I think we probably would have been in a better place today.
And can we expect to see Stormont sitting anytime soon?
Well, I think everybody would like to have their own devolved administration back, but we shouldn't forget that on the 20th anniversary of the Belfast Agreement, Stormont wasn't sitting either, because Sinn Féin had collapsed the institutions for 3 years then over Irish language rights. I think what unionists would like to see now is a respect for their place within the United Kingdom. And I think the Prime Minister can deal with that if he chooses to do so. So I think it'll be interesting to watch what happens after this very significant anniversary, which of course everybody wants to mark, and see where we can go from there, because we do need devolved administration back in Northern Ireland. And I think everybody wants to see that happening on a fair and on a sustainable basis.
Arlene, how important do you think it is that people from across Great Britain and Northern Ireland, younger people, especially younger generations, understand what happened during the Troubles? Because I think a lot of people, I'm 30 years old myself, a lot of people my age and younger have such little knowledge of what happened, and thousands of lives, well, thousands of people were killed.
They were, and you're making me feel very old now, but I lived through the Troubles. I was born in 1970. Yes, I know nobody can understand that I'm 52, but I am, and I lived through it. It was a very difficult time. I was the proud daughter of a police officer. My father, the IRA came to murder my father at our home. Fortunately, they did not succeed. He lived for another 32 years. And it was a very difficult time to grow up in. I don't think we knew it at the time, but I'm very thankful that my children and the young people of today don't have to live in the sort of circumstances that I had to live in during the time when I was growing up. So I am very thankful that terrorism is a thing of the past. As I say, unfortunately, the threat of terrorism from a very small number of Republican terrorists still exists today. And we send our support, of course, to police officers who will be out and about today, making sure that Northern Ireland is safe and the citizens of Northern Ireland remain safe during this time.
Let's hope everybody does get through this weekend and remember what peace has brought, because there was another survey over the weekend that 1 in 4 people, as Emily was just alluding to, 25% of youngsters under the age of 34, peace babies as we call them, are more worried about the economy than the Northern Ireland peace settlement. I mean, what's your reaction to that? As you say, as the daughter of a police officer, you've lived through this, it's affected you personally.
Well, I think it's absolutely normal for people to worry about the immediate concerns that they're dealing with at the time. And of course, we are living through a cost of living crisis, as we've been covering now on GB News for quite some considerable time, long before others actually were covering the issue. So it's no surprise that people are concerned about the issues that they have to deal with in their everyday lives. However, I do think it is important when we're talking about the Belfast Agreement and looking back that we remember the great sacrifices that people did make to bring us peace in Northern Ireland, and the fact that we are living in a much better place. And I'm always positive and optimistic about Northern Ireland's future. We do so many great things here. We're the centre of cybersecurity in Europe. We have so many entrepreneurial and innovative people living and working here. So I'm very positive about the future for Northern Ireland, and I think people should look to the future, but remember what happened in the past and the sacrifices that were made.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Arlene Foster, former First Minister of Northern Ireland and GB News presenter. Thank you so much, and hope all celebrations go peacefully and everyone has a nice time. Right, OK, we move on. With just under a month to go, Buckingham Palace have released the official route King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla will take for the coronation.
It's only a quarter of the distance of Queen Elizabeth's procession.
Ooh, now, joining us for more is the royal broadcaster and commentator, Rafe Haydel-Mancu. Good morning, Rafe. Hello,
good morning.
Lovely.
Good to be with you both.
Thank you for joining us. It's Easter Monday Bank Holiday. I keep forgetting.
Bank Holiday Monday, it is
I know. Right, OK. So, Rafe, we had all the details overnight. Quite exciting. Bit of controversy, though. So should we start off with the shortened route? I mean, what's that about?
Yes, so as you said, it's around a quarter of the length of the Queen's, 1.5 miles. The King's just going to go down the Mall in front of Buckingham Palace, into Trafalgar Square, turn right down Whitehall, into Parliament Square, basically the same route as the state opening of Parliament. They're saying it's been done because of familial reasons, but very familiar route. There's also, of course, the issue that we simply don't have the armed forces strength that we used to have back in 1953. So in 1953, you had around 30,000 troops involved in some capacity, 12,000 of them in the procession. But the armed forces we had back then numbered almost 900,000 in 1953. Today it's barely 200,000. So we're only going to have around 3,000 troops involved in the coronation. There'll be several hundred in this procession as well. So you have to bear that in mind. And also, of course, the King and the Queen are considerably older than the 25-year-old Queen Elizabeth II was in 1953. We know that the King and the Queen have back problems, back pain. Now, that hasn't been confirmed as a reason for shortening this, but it's interesting to note that with a break with tradition, they're going to be using 2 coaches on this occasion. The Gold State coach is normally used both ways, but it's a notorious bone shaker, and it also sways from side to side. You know, King William IV said it was like being on a ship in rough seas. The Queen Victoria was horrified by its oscillation, and the Queen herself, Elizabeth II, said it was horrible. And so that's not a real journey when you're in your 70s you want to be taken, given it's got 18th century suspension with leather straps on it. So they're going to be taking the much nicer, modern 2012 Diamond Jubilee state carriage, which has hydraulic suspension and stabilizers, air conditioning, heating, and electric windows even in the body of a wonderful 18th century style carriage. So they'll be travelling in some comfort there, and on the journey back it'll be in the old bone shaker.
Rafe, does King Charles, is he slightly concerned about being seen to be too decadent, particularly during a cost of living crisis, but also because younger generations aren't as pro-monarchy as others? Is he concerned about that sort of thing? Could that have something to do with the short length of the procession, for example?
I'm not sure whether that's really the reason for the procession itself, although you make a very good point about the broader issue surrounding the coronation. The decision, for example, not to have peers appearing in their grand coronation robes, for example. No coronets are being used. So there is a sense to modernise the monarchy on the one hand, but also in this cost of living era to have a cost of living coronation. Speaking personally, I think that's a bit of a shame. It's at times like these that we need occasions of great pomp and pageantry to actually lift the spirits. We have to remember in 1953, Britain was living through a period where we still had rationing, and yet that was probably the most opulent and decadent of all coronations. And indeed, when the Queen got married in 1947, heavy rationing was in place then, and women were cutting out their own ration coupons for clothing to give to the Queen so she could have, to the Princess Elizabeth rather at the time, to have her wedding dress. So actually, I think we need to ensure that we do maintain some semblance of tradition. I mean, nothing could be more opulent than having a 4-ton gold state coach, I think.
Well, quite.
Who doesn't have one of those in the garage at home? Rafe, but I mean, that's a really good point, isn't it? I mean, there are pictures and pages in all the newspapers today of the crown jewels in all their glory. They're going to be used. I mean, the crowns, 2 crowns that Charles is going to use, the crown Camilla's going to use. And it's very controversial. It's the ivory sceptre, isn't it, that people are getting their nicks in a twist about because it's ivory. And Charles is a big conservation campaigner, isn't he? So should Camilla use the ivory? Shouldn't she use the ivory? What do we reckon to that one?
Of course she should. I mean, absolutely. I think it's essential. I'm still getting over the fact that we're not going to have the Kohinoor diamond in the crown worn by the Queen at her coronation. That was a gesture towards understanding the history behind the Kohinoor, and there were protests from India about that. And some people did think that for very much the same reason, there would be a decision not to use the ivory sceptre, particularly because Prince William has been campaigning on the illegal trade in ivory for years. He's been president since 2005 of the Tusk Trust, which actually is centred upon this very issue. And he's reported to have said that he wants to have all of the ivory at Buckingham Palace destroyed in order to set an example. But I think the palace understands quite rightly that there's a difference between historic ivory and the modern trade in ivory. There are wonderful, glorious items in the royal collection which are of great historic importance, and it will be a great shame not to use them. One of these is the ivory sceptre. It's called the rod with dove. The Queen will have 2 sceptres, one representing temporal power, one representing spiritual power, echoing the 2 that the King will have. And this is a wonderful 3-foot-long ivory sceptre made in 1685 for Queen Mary of Modena, the wife of James II at her coronation, and it's been used by every Queen consort since then. So it's only right that it should continue to be used now.
Well, there you go. We shouldn't have to give up everything traditional just because a few activists are getting their knickers in a twist, as you said.
I love the pomp and ceremony, and surely it's going to be good for tourism. But obviously the burning question, and I don't want to drag the conversation down to their level, but do we know yet if a certain Harry and Meghan will be popping over?
Who's that? Harry and Meghan? I'm not sure.
Yeah, a couple from California, evidently.
Look, I mean, this is the greatest who they and will they and won't they. I said yesterday that they seem to be confusing the coronation for Coronation Street. They're turning what is the greatest ceremonial and constitutional event we have, the first one for 70 years, into a soap opera. And it's a needless distraction, actually, to have this constant focus on them. They need to make a public statement. We know, for example, about every other dignitary who's coming, all the presidents and kings, and they have far more busy schedules. We're told that Prince Harry's been having lengthy discussions with the palace behind the scenes. Well, why do you need lengthy discussions? You work 1 hour a week, apparently, according to sources. It's not like you have a busy schedule. Just get on a plane, go into the Abbey, sit down and leave. I mean, it's not a complicated scenario. Let's have an end to all of this.
I mean, Rafe, if he can come to London, if he can jet to London to appear in a court, then I think he could make it to the coronation of his father. You would have thought, but I guess he wants to keep us all on a knife edge, Dawn.
Absolutely. As you say, it's Coronation Street rather than his father's coronation. That is Rafe Manroo. Sorry. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Rafe, and more on this.
Slight butchering of his name.
I know, Dawn. I'm sorry. It's early, it's Easter Monday, come on.
It's very hard to say. We will be right back with all the latest on the historic Good Friday Agreement. Stay tuned.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Of all the days of this long Easter weekend, today is certainly looking like the dampest one for many of us, and that is due to this weather front that has been pushing its way overnight, moving from Northern Ireland into Scotland and England, and will continue to linger for some as we move throughout the morning, particularly across Shetland, but also South East England. Could take until the afternoon before all that cloud and rain eventually clears its way off. For other areas of the UK, there will be some sunny spells, but also quite frequent showers moving in from the west, and these could certainly be heavy at times with the risk of some hail and thunder in the mixture. They will also merge into longer spells of rain, I think particularly across areas of Scotland. Temperatures just a touch down compared to where we saw them on Sunday, but generally around average for the time of year, highs of 10 to 14 degrees Celsius. There will be a fresh breeze around the place as well, and that will just take the edge off things, and it will remain quite blustery into this evening as we continue to see showers pushing their way in. Into the early hours of Tuesday, those showers will tend to die out a bit more, and we'll see more in the way of some clear intervals. That will allow temperatures to just drop off slightly more compared to where we saw them last night. Towns and cities holding up around 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. So still a scattering of showers to watch out for, particularly across western areas first thing on Tuesday. Generally further east, you will see some brightness first thing. Into the afternoon, it's this area of rain that we're watching out for, pushing its way in from the southwest into England, Wales, and then Northern Ireland a little later on as well. Will turn quite damp here, and that certainly putting a damper on the end of the day. Probably feeling a touch better when we hold on to the sunshine further towards the north and east. That is, though, accompanied by quite windy conditions, and we have a yellow wind warning in force for Tuesday night into Wednesday, and that could possibly bring some disruption. Otherwise, enjoy your Monday. Bye-bye.
Good morning and happy Easter Monday. It's 10 o'clock and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Dawn Neeson, and the wonderful Emily Carver.
Thank you.
Today, Starmer doubles down. The Labour leader says he stands by every word of a Labour Party advert that accuses Rishi Sunak of not wanting child sex abusers to go to jail, adding that he makes absolutely zero apologies for being blunt, no matter how squeamish it might make some people feel. Could this backfire, though?
Rishi Sunak has called for a return to power sharing in Northern Ireland as he marks 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement. It comes ahead of a visit by US President Joe Biden tomorrow.
And the biggest ever rise in state pensions is set to take effect today. The record-breaking 10.1% increase will still not keep pace with inflation, though, which unexpectedly rose to 10.4% last month.
Wonder what our viewers make of that. Now, travelling in style, the King and Queen consort will head to the coronation in a coach with air conditioning, electric windows and state-of-the-art suspension. We'll have all the details of the coronation route and discuss the controversial issue of ivory. Let us know all your views at gbnews.uk. We will get stuck into all of today's top stories in just one moment. But first, let's get the news with Tamsin Roberts.
Emily, thank you. Good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 10. Police in Northern Ireland are on high alert after the terror threat was raised over possible attacks targeting officers today. That's as the Prime Minister marks the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, urging the return of power-sharing instalment. Rishi Sunak, who will travel to Northern Ireland to host the US President Joe Biden tomorrow, also praised the bravery of the leaders who secured the deal. Former leader of the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland, Lord John Allardyce, says parties aren't facing the pressures of the past and must resolve their differences.
Negotiating in the middle of and after a huge, long, violent campaign is far more difficult than the process of negotiating now. We should be able to overcome the problems of the moment because they're not in the context of a violent terrorist campaign. And people need to remember that was the biggest difficulty we faced, and it's not a difficulty we have to face in the same way now.
NHS England says emergency care will be prioritised during the junior doctors' strike. The 4-day walkout, which begins tomorrow morning, is being described as the most disruptive industrial action in NHS history. The health body warns a dispute over pay will mean appointments and operations will be cancelled, and there'll be immense pressure on both staff and services. People receiving the state pension will see their payments increase by 10.1% from today. The increase has been confirmed by Chancellor Jeremy Hunt in his November 2022 autumn statement. Depending on the pension, weekly payments will rise to either £156.20 or £203.85. State Economics Advisor Vicky Price says the rise is long overdue.
Last year, they should have got a very substantial increase because earnings were rising very fast after COVID, when, of course, earnings fell during that period. But they didn't. They only got the 2.5% instead of maybe 8 or 9% they would have got otherwise. So this is up to a point, sort of going back to where we were, but a bit of a compensation because by comparison to what's going on across the economy, particularly in the public sector, pay rises have not kept in line with inflation.
The Labour leader says he stands by every word of an advert that accuses Rishi Sunak of not wanting child sex abusers to go to jail. Writing in the Daily Star, Sir Keir Starmer says he makes zero apologies for the campaign ad, which was posted on Twitter. That's despite criticism from MPs, including from within his own party, with Lord David Blunkett calling it gutter politics. Ukraine says they've repelled more than 40 enemy attacks over the past 24 hours as Russia steps up strikes on key cities. Bakhmut and Avdiivka are among the areas involved in the heaviest fighting. Meanwhile, a 50-year-old man and his daughter were killed after a missile struck a residential building in the southeast town of Zaporizhzhia. Russia's defence ministry says its forces destroyed a depot with 70,000 tonnes of fuel near the town. China has carried out naval and aerial blockade drills around Taiwan for a third day. The drill started following the Taiwanese president's recent meeting with the United States House Speaker. Taiwan's defence ministry said it spotted 59 Chinese military planes flying near the country, and it maintains a high degree of vigilance as Chinese exercises continue. China claims democratically governed Taiwan as its own territory. The King and Queen Consort will travel to the Coronation at Westminster Abbey in a more comfortable, relatively modern horse-drawn carriage. They'll ride in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, first used in 2014, before returning in a shorter procession in the Gold State Coach. The Gold Carriage, which dates back to 1831, weighs 4 tons and travels at walking speed. It's been used in every coronation since the 1830s. And to mark the 21st century ceremony, a special emoji has been created. It shows a 17th century gold St Edward's crown with a purple velvet cap. Wizz Air has been named the worst major airline for flight delays from UK airports for the second year in a row. In an investigation by the Civil Aviation Authority, the airline's departures were 46 minutes, 6 seconds behind schedule in 2022, more than 3 times longer than the previous year. Wizz Air operates short-haul flights from 8 UK airports, including Birmingham, Edinburgh, Gatwick and Luton. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, back to Dawn and Emily.
Good morning, welcome back. It's Easter Bank Holiday Monday. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is Emily Carver, and we are taking you through all of the happening stories this morning. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he makes absolutely zero apologies for the ad campaign that has provoked anger from within his own party of how squeamish it makes people.
From initially accusing the Prime Minister of thinking child sex abusers shouldn't go to prison, Labour followed up with ads on adults convicted of firearms, possession and theft.
Marvellous. Earlier on, GB News spoke to Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry on why Labour were targeting the government on crime.
It is disgraceful. They do not take this matter seriously, and Labour does, and Keir Starmer does, and we're going to do something about it. We cannot continue to have too few police, too few arrests, too long waits to get into court, and then when you get to court, then the judge is being told by the Lord Chief Justice to think twice about sending people to prison because the prisons are so crowded. That's how bad it is, and when people are released, they're not being supervised properly and they go off and commit more crimes.
Well, there she is, Emily Thornberry. What a trooper standing out there in the rain with her big umbrella. Regardless of what she's actually saying, you know, she's up early on a bank holiday Monday. So with us in the studio, we have GB News political reporter Olivia Utley. Good morning, Olivia. Happy bank holiday Monday. So what should we make of this all? You've heard what Emily Thornberry had to say there.
Well, in a way, it's quite a clever attack line from Labour. Of course, on Twitter and in sort of metropolitan elite circles, if you like, there's outrage at it. But Labour's hope and expectation is that targeting Rishi Sunak on rising crime will cut through, as they put it, to the electorate. We know that rising crime is an issue which is coming up in pretty much every single focus group across the country. Every time we hear polls, it's the thing which is on the steepest trajectory upwards, worries about crime. So it's quite a clever attack line from Labour. Yeah, there are other issues which concern people more than rising crime, but it's the one which is turning into more and more of a worry as the weeks and months progress. So it might be quite a clever attack line from Labour. It's also an area which the Tories traditionally have more legitimacy on. So Labour's trying to sort of steal the Tories' clothes again. The other clever angle is that it's a shock tactic. They know that people will be furious about it. They know that some of their own MPs will be furious about it. They know that Tory supporters in the country will be furious about it, which gets people talking. Particularly when you've got a sort of quite a quiet bank holiday weekend, people start talking about this issue and it throws a spotlight on it. And whether or not it's true, whether or not there's any legitimacy to it, you know, there of course is a very good argument that under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, many of these people were released from prison early as well. The issue with short parole periods has been going on for decades. But it gets people talking about it. It gets people focused on Labour's policies. And that, at the moment, is exactly what Keir Starmer needs.
Do you think, though, there is it's proving... I mean, when you've got big guns in the Labour Party, like Diane Abbott coming out and saying, these are not good ideas, we shouldn't be doing this, we're lowering ourselves to the nasty Tory party level. So it's also showing there's quite a bit of division still within the Labour Party.
Absolutely. And there is another argument which I think might actually hold some water, which is that perhaps with another leader, a strategy like this would work, sort of dirty tactics would work quite well. But over the last just over 3 years, Keir Starmer has made his niche being the sort of constructive opposition man. Remember how he behaved during lockdown? It was all about sort of supporting the government. It was all about cleaning up the Labour Party, showing that the sort of gutter politics that Jeremy Corbyn engaged in was below Keir Starmer. So he's managed to sort of cultivate this impression of himself as a sort of clean kind of politician. So resorting to these kind of tactics, while it might work for someone else, might not go down particularly well with Starmer.
It's quite vicious, and I imagine the Conservative Party will probably take the lead now in terms of they'll copy where Labour Party have gone. It's interesting, Keir Starmer has written for the Mail on Sunday. Of course, their readership will be concerned with law and order. Many Conservative voters may read the Mail on Sunday. He's really trying to grab that space when it comes to law and order. Whether people believe him, I'm not sure, but that is definitely the attack line for the next elections.
Definitely. There's also a sort of hint of desperation about this. We know that when Keir Starmer took office, and for the first almost 3 years while he was leader of the opposition, the Labour strategy was essentially to paint him as the sensible person in the room, the safe pair of hands, the competent politician. And against Boris Johnson and Liz Truss's premierships, that worked quite well. It was pretty tumultuous, the government. Now we've got Rishi Sunak in charge. He is, whatever you make of him, a sort of competent, slick, sensible, if you like, technocratic politician. So Keir Starmer has got a much bigger job on his hands, getting clean blue water between him and the Tories. So this is one strategy which is clearly designed to sort of show the difference between Labour and the Tories. And there's certainly perhaps a little hint of desperation about it.
In Keir Starmer's defence on this one, it has shown that finally, after 3 years, that, you know, he is doing something that you're actually noticing.
Well, exactly. And I think the fact that we are talking about it, that is the purpose of strategies like this.
Though, because it seems to me, I've read a lot about how he's getting this advice from Labour movements across the world, so from Australia, from America. It seems like he's just being advised in this fashion, whether it's the true Keir Starmer. I'm not sure who the true Keir Starmer is.
Exactly. And I think as we were sort of touched on earlier, I think that is a big part of the problem. The fact that he has cultivated one particular image of himself as the kinder, gentler politician. He's worked so hard. The one thing which I think can be universally agreed that he has achieved is showing that he has moved on from the Corbyn era. And a lot of that was getting rid of the kind of nastiness in the Labour Party. So, as you say, I think there's a danger for him now of resorting back to those nasty politics and ending up with people just not knowing quite who he is.
Right, OK, if we get some more analysis on this one, let's join Chief Political Commentator at The Independent, John Rentoul. Good morning, John. Please stay with us, Olivia. Good morning, John.
Hello, Dawn.
Hello. Right. Well, you've heard what Olivia's had to say. You've heard what Emily Thornberry had to say on our breakfast show this morning. Labour are ploughing on with this. They are the new nasty party, surely.
Yeah, no, it's very depressing, and I think Olivia put her finger on it. It's not what Keir Starmer is. It's not how he presented himself. He presented himself as a politician of integrity and high standards against Boris Johnson, and was extremely upset and genuinely upset, I think, when Boris Johnson accused him of having failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile when he was DPP, when Keir Starmer was DPP. That was an extremely low blow, and I condemned it at the time, and I condemn this attack ad. I mean, saying that Rishi Sunak wants to let child sex abusers out of jail, I think is absolutely beneath contempt.
Well, John, he's just trying to draw attention. I'll play devil's advocate here. He's just trying to draw attention to the government's record when it comes to justice. He wrote in the Mail on Sunday, Keir Starmer that is, I make absolutely zero apologies for being blunt about this. Is there a bit of pearl clutching going on in the world of Westminster?
No, I don't. Absolutely not. You don't do something completely reprehensible just in order to draw attention to something. That's not how politics works, or certainly not how politics should work, and it's not how Keir Starmer promised that politics would work when he became leader and when he was opposing Boris Johnson, who did have a tendency to take politics into the gutter. Rishi Sunak doesn't do that, and I think to concede the high moral ground to the Prime Minister is a huge mistake for the leader of the opposition.
Do you think, John, it might backfire in as much as it might win more sympathy for our not necessarily the Conservative Party, but maybe Rishi Sunak personally?
Yes, because it's a very unfair attack on the Prime Minister. It's the sort of thing that Labour people, including Keir Starmer himself, deprecated when it was done to him. And it's an appalling example of double standards. And it's no use Labour people going around saying, "Oh well, everybody's talking about it, and they're all talking about our policies on crime." They haven't got any policies on crime. We ought to hear those policies instead of this gutter politics.
Also, people seem to find Rishi Sunak quite agreeable on the whole. I think that's what the polling shows. I think, personally, it would be better attack line just to go after the Tories as a generic group and just, go after them as the successive governments. But there you go. I'm not advising the Labour Party, am I, Dawn?
Well, I mean, maybe it might be a good thing. Actually, talking of advice, John, what advice would you give now if you were advising Rishi Sunak on how to respond to the personal level of this attack? Should he not complain or explain, or should he have a comeback strategy?
Well, no, I think he should just be dignified and explain what his policies are, because he has perfectly reasonable policies on crime as well. Crime is always going to be a difficult issue. People will always think that not enough is being done. And not enough is being done. But there are no easy answers to crime or indeed anything else. And I think Rishi Sunak's presentation as a reasonable technocratic manager of politics is the sort of thing that the voters want to hear from. They don't want to hear the kind of personal attacks that Labour's now indulging in.
Right, that's John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator of The Independent. Thank you so much for joining us, John. Right, OK. The Prime Minister has underlined the defining message of the landmark deal of the Northern Ireland Agreement and is urging parties in Northern Ireland to work together for a better future.
It comes as the Prime Minister prepares to meet with US President Joe Biden tomorrow evening as he steps off Air Force One in Belfast.
Right, joining us for more on this now is GB News Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie. Good morning, Doogie. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit what the feelings are like over there at the moment? Are people optimistic about the 25th anniversary?
Well, in a word, no, not really. I mean, I'm standing exactly where we got first sight of this agreement 25 years ago. As a young member of the media, we all gathered here to look and see what the future of Northern Ireland would be. And it was an agreement built on consent, nationality, and really governance. And of course, the Brexit arrangements have pretty much driven a horse and cart through that agreement. Unionists are now saying we're not going back into power because we can't make our own laws, we can't govern ourselves, we have no representation inside Europe. So as a fact of that, Stormont now is not working anymore, and Rishi Sunak is bringing a US Prime Minister to Northern Ireland who isn't going to address the Northern Ireland Assembly because it's not working. In fact, Joe Biden is only attending one event in Belfast at the University of Ulster, probably on Wednesday. He's arriving in here Tuesday night. That'll be on a Wednesday. And no matter how you look at that, that is actually quite embarrassing for the British government to say that, well, 25 years on, this landmark agreement is now no longer working and no longer stable. And it's worse for the people of Northern Ireland because, of course, the Good Friday Agreement did stop loads of violence in Northern Ireland. It stopped the communities being split. In fact, the whole thing around identity and culture was right at the heart of the Good Friday Agreement. And it must be said, I mean, Northern Ireland is a totally different place in the last 25 years, but the agreement has evolved once with the St Andrews Agreement, and it may now need looked at again to find out how they are going to make this work, how they're going to bring in the middle ground, but also how they're going to bring in young men that have been really isolated in this agreement the whole way from 25 years ago. Some of the highest suicide rates in Europe are here in Northern Ireland amongst young men. I know that a lot of that is still in the towns and cities in and around Britain as well. But they were the section of that community that didn't really come forward and come into the institutions that were here. So if we were looking at an agreement now, they would have to be over those issues again, once more over identity, culture, and how you can be inclusive of the whole community.
Thank you very much indeed, Doogie Beattie, our reporter from Northern Ireland. We'll be coming back to that later in the show to get reaction.
We've got some views coming in as well. And this show, it's so important, especially on a bank holiday Monday. If you're sitting here with a nice cup of tea, it's not very nice weather out, so you may as well sort of like, you know, put the sunshade and join us.
Nothing better to do than watch us.
Exactly. And we're looking bright and festive for you. So we've got some views coming in from you, and it is about your opinion. So you're telling us what you think. And sort of like on the Labour situation in particular, Steve says, good morning, Steve, the personal attacks on the Prime Minister by the Labour Party are the desperate acts of an organisation that has nothing of any substance to offer the country. Shame on them.
Brutal.
But you can understand the point, can't you?
They do appear a little rattled with this ad campaign.
Yes.
They're worried that people like Rishi Sunak a little bit too much.
I think, but this is like, it's like kids fighting in a playground, isn't it? Chris, good morning, Chris. Chris, you say, we are also tired of the bickering in politics. When are they going to pay attention to fixing the country and stop bickering?
Yes, well, there is never any consent on anything, it seems, in our parliament.
You know what?
Very little.
Emily, I keep forgetting that, you know, we pay their wages.
That's true.
They, in theory, work for us. And yet we've got this childish campaign going on, flinging insults, and they're not getting things fixed. And that's such a good point. Why are they not fixing things? As John said, why don't we hear what Labour are going to do rather than hurling untrue insults at Rishi Sunak?
Well, Rishi Sunak has his 5 big pledges, so we'll be able to mark that come the next election.
Right.
See if he's achieved those.
Tick the boxes there, shall we?
Mark his coursework.
Well, we have to move on. So, but still to come, loads more. We'll be looking at the latest news about King Charles's coronation. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning. Happy Easter Bank Holiday Monday. It's 10:25 a.m. You're with To The Point on GB News with Dawn Neeson and Emily Carver. Now, with just under a month to go, it's exciting, isn't it? Buckingham Palace have released the official route King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla will take for the coronation.
And it's only a quarter of the distance of Queen Elizabeth's procession.
Curious.
Bit stingy.
For all things coronation now, let's talk to a royal and entertainment reporter for the Sunday Mirror, Sarah Robertson. Hello, Sarah. Good morning. Thank you for joining us, Sarah. I hope you had your fill of Easter eggs and looking for a nice bank holiday as well. Right, OK. Sarah, so we've had all the details of the coronation released overnight. We've got the jewels, we've got the procession, we've got mostly who's going to be there. So what do you make of sort of like, well, the fact that it's a shortened procession for a start? I mean, so many people are not going to be able to see it now.
That's correct. Yes, it was a bit disappointing, I think, for some royal fans who had hoped he would follow in the Queen's footsteps. The Queen, 70 years ago, her procession was 5 miles long. She passed along through Oxford Street, Regent Street, Piccadilly, where she waved to all the crowds. This is a much shorter procession, Dawn. It's only 1.3 miles. He's going to be going back from the Abbey, Westminster Abbey, to Buckingham Palace via Trafalgar, under Admiralty Arch, and then passing along through Pall Mall back to the palace. So it's a very short route for crowds to gather in order to be able to see the King and Queen as they go past in their golden royal coach. And I think this is a shame, actually, for royal fans. It would be lovely to have, a much bigger route so people have more of a chance of being in a vantage point and seeing this. Because, again, for people who haven't seen such a thing before, who weren't there when the Queen was crowned, this might be the only chance they get to see of a coronation. So it feels a shame that it's going to be such a short route and that royal watchers may not get that opportunity.
There's been quite a lot of talk about King Charles striking the right balance between, protecting tradition and all the pomp and ceremony, and also being seen as a modern monarch as well. Do you think this ceremony, do you think this coronation will reflect the right balance?
Well, I think that's what he's aiming for, Emily. King Charles, wants to be a king of the people, and he understands we're going through a cost of living crisis. Times economically are fluctuating. It's very turbulent. People are, watching the pennies, and he's obviously aware that the public, they can't afford to have such things. So why should someone else have all this pomp and ceremony and all this money spent when, this money needs to be invested in the NHS, into schools, and so on and so on. So he's aware of that, and I think he's trying to strike that balance. But then you also have to think this is the only time we're going to see a coronation, and it's putting Britain on the world stage. And I think we deserve to have lots of pomp and ceremony. We deserve to have a wonderful coronation. It's going to bring people together. It's going to bring that community feel like what we saw with the Queen's Jubilee last year. And I think it would be lovely to see a little bit more. But I think Charles is sort of trying to stick with the status quo, so to speak. And he wants to be seen, as I say, this king of the people. He wants to be seen as one of us. And he's aware that, a lot of people are going through hard times, and he doesn't want to be looking like he's spending lots of money and rubbing people's faces into it. So it's sort of trying to help, satisfy one group, and then the other group, wants a little bit more. So he's trying to sort of strike that balance between the two communities.
You're talking about seeing it and watching it. We know it's starting at 11 o'clock on the day, and it's going to be on telly. Obviously, you can watch it all here on GB News. But if you actually wanted to go, I mean, there were thousands of people that want to watch the Queen's coronation on that 5-mile route. From what I understand, there's going to be no ballot system for people to queue up and watch this procession. So are people going to be camping overnight to get a place? It's going to be chaos.
Sorry to interrupt you there when you were speaking, Dawn. Yes, you're exactly right. They are going to be camping out from really early on, probably from about a week in advance. A bit like what we saw with the Queen's funeral procession. You know, people sort of gathered outside of Windsor and places, you know, to sort of get a vantage point for that. This is going to be the same again. You know, you've got real avid royal fans, you know, and fans of King Charles will want to get a great spot. They know there's such a shortened route. There's not much chance for them in that 1.3 miles. So they're going to get there early, stake their claim, get their tent out and stay there for quite a while. And I just think if they could have extended it a little bit more, it gives more opportunity for fans, for royal watchers to come down and have a chance as well. There's going to be lots of jumping out behind people's heads to try and see something. But it's still going to be a wonderful, wonderful day that I think will really bring the country together and is much needed right now.
I'm looking forward to Cameron Walker being camped out there, our royal reporter out there getting all those interviews with people who are absolutely in love with the monarch. But I don't think he should even try to be a man of the people, you know? He should just... People like the pomp, people like the ceremony, most people, anyway.
Exactly.
But let us know what you...
There is some ceremony, yes. There are some traditions still. They're using the old state royal gold coach. That's going to be making an appearance to take the King and Queen back to Buckingham Palace. And the coach is 260 years old, and apparently it creaks like an old galleon when it trundles along. Although it's a lot smoother than when the Queen was sat in it 70 years ago. So there is elements of the old. And Camilla, it's now been confirmed that the Queen Consort Camilla, when she's crowned Queen, she is going to be holding the ivory scepter. That wasn't sure if she was going to have that. There was a bit of controversy over that, but she is actually going to be holding that. That's her second staff, and she's going to be holding that during the ceremony. So we do see a lot of tradition. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
So much to say.
Talking. Thank you, Sarah Robertson, who's Royal and Entertainment reporter for the Sunday Mirror. We have to go, unfortunately. We're late for the news, but still to come. We have more on the controversial Labour attack ads and the public's reaction to them. That's after your morning news with Tamsin Roberts.
Dawn, thank you. It's 10:32. Here are the headlines from the GB newsroom. Police in Northern Ireland are on high alert after the terror threat was raised over possible attacks targeting officers today. That's as the Prime Minister marks the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, urging the return of power-sharing instalment. Rishi Sunak, who will travel to Northern Ireland to host the US President Joe Biden tomorrow, also praised the bravery of the leaders who secured the deal. NHS England says emergency care will be prioritised during the junior doctor strike. The four-day walkout, which begins tomorrow morning, is being described as the most disruptive industrial action in NHS history. The health body warns a dispute over pay will mean appointments and operations will be cancelled, and there'll be immense pressure on both staff and services. The Labour leader has defended a decision to post an ad that targets Rishi Sunak, suggesting the PM doesn't want child sex abusers to go to jail. Writing in the Daily Mail, Sir Keir Starmer says he makes zero apologies for the campaign post. That's despite criticism from MPs, including those from his own party, with Lord David Blunkett calling it gutter politics. The King and Queen Consort will travel to the coronation at Westminster Abbey in a comfortable, air-conditioned, horse-drawn carriage. They'll ride in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, first used in 2014, before returning in a shorter procession in the Gold State Coach. To mark the 21st century ceremony, a special crown emoji has also been created. TV, online, radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dawn and Emily.
Thanks, Tamsin. In just a few moments, we'll be going through the biggest stories in today's papers. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is 10:38 a.m. This is To The Point with Dawn Neeson and me, Emily Carver.
You don't want to know what's coming next. Actually, you do. Hang around. Right, it's time to look through some of the stories that are making the headlines today. And to do that, we're joined by political commentator Bushra Sheikh, as well as a former Labour MP, Stephen Pound. And it's already got messy, I can tell you that much. Right, OK, both looking very gorgeous. Bushra, you're looking particularly gorgeous this morning.
Thank you.
Well,
Stephen.
Actually, Stephen always looks gorgeous. So does Bushra, actually.
Steady on.
So, right, Stephen, OK, let's start with you. We have to talk about politics, don't we?
Yeah.
So your story is in the Daily Mail. Keir Starmer is absolutely zero apologies for those adverts.
I'm surprised by this, but on the other hand, I think I understand what's going on here. The funny thing is, only on the front page of one paper, this story, and yet this particular, and everybody knows what it's about. This is his accusation he's made against Rishi Sunak that he was somehow soft on jailing sex abusers. And this is obviously a comeback from the awful comment that Boris Johnson made, implying that Keir Starmer had somehow refused to prosecute Jimmy Savile, which is absolute rubbish. But the interesting thing about this is that there are some people within the Labour Party who will see this as a success, because 21 million people have actually already viewed this advert online. Now, interestingly, the 2 wings of the Labour Party, if you like, John McDonnell and David Blunkett, have both said, we're better than this. And I think I hope what's happening here is that this is setting the standard now, and then we can say, look, let's have a non-aggression pact. Let's realise if we race to the bottom, we're going to end up like Trump.
Like, how ghastly. How ghastly. But it's interesting because he, of course...
You're clutching your pearls.
I am clutching my absolutely.
I think there's a little bit of pearl clutching going about, but I think I am in the minority on that. But he did write for the Mail on Sunday yesterday, saying, I make absolutely zero apologies for being blunt about this. Bushra, do you think it's awful? Do you think it's terrible?
I'm sort of sat in the middle of this because I know that there is a part where politicians want to have impact and that's going to have an effect on their party. So is all publicity good publicity? This is what we were discussing earlier. And in some cases it can be. And I think this is the kind of angle that they've taken. They're like, we need to get the viewers, we need to get people on our side. Whether they agree with what we're saying or not is another question. Because what was it? 20 million people have seen as a huge amount. Huge.
But the thing that really infuriates me is that there's a huge flank at which the Labour Party could attack the Tories, and particularly on economic competence. And now, the thing is, all Keir Starmer has to do is to say to Rishi Sunak, do you support Liz Truss's policies, yes or no? If he says no, then there'll be a real problem within the Tory party because there's still a lot of people who are great Liz Truss supporters. If he says yes, then he's going to look risible. So instead of which we're concentrating on this, let's hope that we don't descend into... In Scottish politics, you have this awful thing where you have the cyber
It's brutal in Scotland.
Yeah. But let's move on to something even more depressing. Bushra, this is your story. This is from the Financial Times.
Yes.
Rising mortgage rates compromise on number of bedrooms we now have?
Yeah, so first-time buyers are opting to buy smaller homes, which makes sense because you've got the rising interest rates. It's so difficult for people to get mortgages at the moment. So the only obvious choice would be to downsize. Not buy what you really want, just get something. So you're on the property ladder. And I genuinely feel so sorry for people who are trying to buy their first homes. It's awful. It really is.
We're all living in shoeboxes. We're going to be. Well, gone are the days of having a whole house. All houses seem to be split up into 3-4 flats now, it seems.
Well, unfortunately, I've got this new thing, permitted development, where we don't even need planning permission to turn a typical terraced house in my part of the world in West London into 5 or 6 bedsitters. You don't even need planning permission. It's a nightmare.
No.
Yeah. But the places are getting smaller and smaller. There's a big pressure, certainly in London, for people of my age, i.e. ancient, to give up their homes, which have got gardens. And actually let somebody build on top of it.
But why would they? Because of stamp duty. It's so hideously expensive to move.
Absolutely right. We get, and I ain't moving.
I am staying.
There is this demonisation, though, of older homeowners now. Not that you're ancient, by the way, but older homeowners, where it's like, well, you've got a big house, you're a millionaire. And it's like, on paper, your property, especially if you live in London and the South East or some of the cities up north now as well, your property is worth a lot of money. But you still can't afford to heat it.
No.
Or you can't afford to sell it, as Emily's just pointed out, stamp duty.
A house is worth a house. In other words, I could get a lot of money for my house, but then where would I live? If I've got to move somewhere else, I'm going to have to pay a stonking great amount.
We'd have you here. We'd find a little bed for you in the GBNews office.
I could curl up in the corner.
You won't be the first person to have slept overnight. Shall we move on?
First person who slept with Nigel Farage here.
Shall we tell more about that one? That sounds really interesting.
Well, I mean, people do say that Patrick Christys must sleep here sometimes when he's doing the late night shifts. Anyway, moving on swiftly. Back to you, Stephen, actually. We'll come to you, Bushra, in just one moment. But Northern Ireland's peace is fragile in the Daily Telegraph.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary thing. It's 25 years ago, I was there at the time, and I have to say, there's a lot of people will attack Tony Blair for one thing or another, but the work he did then, I remember at least 3 days without sleep, and it was just incredible the amount of work to bringing those people together. We had what was called proximity talks, where they wouldn't be in the same room as each other, so we had to talk to the DUP and the UUP and the Shinners in separate rooms. But the ridiculous thing is the population of Northern Ireland is about 1.5 million. The number of dissident terrorists, Ogden O'Haran or real IRA, call them what you will, is what, maybe 60, 70? Everybody knows who they are. And why on earth can't we get a grip on this? Can't we sort this out? When we have an off-duty police officer in Omagh, of all places, coaching a kids' football team, getting shot a couple of weeks ago. It just shows you that there is a fragility here. And the real problem we've got here, that there are certain people who are your age, who were born after the Good Friday Agreement, who've not known the horrors of the Troubles of the 30 years. And yet, every now and then, all they have to do is to sort of play this old 1916 music, the heroes of 16, and for some reason, it actually gets people going. It's sort of the terrible beauty is born, as Yeats said. So it is fragile, but that's all the more reason for making even more of an effort. And Rishi's over there today. Joe Biden's on his way to Ballina, but he'll be there today. And there's so much good in Northern Ireland. So many good people. And it's also great people. And God, it's a beautiful part of the world too.
It is an absolutely beautiful place, yeah, no, absolutely. And we hope that it does pass peacefully.
Well, your family must be Irish, mustn't it?
The husband might have something to do with, the Neesom film.
Well, there's
name, not mine.
There's a clue in the name.
Yeah, there is, yeah, and the fact that he likes to drink. Obviously, right,
Ooh.
OK.
Well, Lent has just finished.
People, just the husband, by the way, but it was Easter, I'll let him off. OK, right, Bushford, let's move swiftly on. Hello, darling. Let's move swiftly on. You picked a story from The Guardian, which is also quite a depressing story, isn't it? A third of people from ethnic religious minorities have experienced racially motivated physical or verbal abuse.
Yeah.
What's going on?
It's over a third. That's a huge chunk of people. And it's interesting because what they've said is that Britain's not even close to being a racially just society. So, what is that saying? That's saying that we've still got lots of work to do when it comes to integration, how people are treated in the workplace, because I think the full article goes into detail about it's just not on the street and it's just not in a social sphere. It's at work. So we know, and we've had discussions about this, where intrinsically our establishments and industries, bias, and do they still discriminate? So this article really highlights some of that factor, because that's huge people. It's over a third of people that have.
It's a depressing amount, even now, after, all the sort of the efforts that we have made. I mean, have you experienced anything that, has really shocked you on the discrimination?
Personally, Mia, I did experience it when I was younger, actually. And now, as I've got older, I've not experienced it as much, but I've definitely have experienced discrimination, which is quite an obvious bias that people hold. Not so much now, but I have seen how things have got better. So it's not like we're not moving in the right direction. I feel that we are, and the conversations that we are having are much needed, because if we want to be just, amongst each other, we need to have those hard discussions.
Well, yes, because people from all around the world would come to the UK to live. I would say, on the whole, Britain is a fantastically tolerant, accepting, welcoming country. So while we should look at this sort of survey that is done and pay attention to people who say they're being racially, verbally abused, of course, that is terrible, but also a little focus on how well integrated we are as a country.
I think it's also
Might
very
be nice.
I'm delighted to hear Busher say that things have got slightly better.
Yeah.
I think that when I was young, it was overt. I mean, people used to come up to West Indian kids on the bus and touch their hair for luck. And I can remember, imagine, being a kid from Jamaica or Trinidad and having somebody
Get
come.
off me.
Yeah. So, but that was the overt. Nowadays, it is more covert. These tests where people apply for jobs, and if you have a name that is, obviously not a white Anglo-Saxon name, you tend not to get. But I think it is getting better.
Yeah.
And I think that people are now more ashamed of their racism. But it's still there. But it is there. I think we're on the right slope forward.
And I think Emily says we are, on the whole, a very tolerant country, and there are other places, it's certainly in Europe, far worse.
Hungary.
No, of course. And I think the things that we're doing really well, we should really focus on those, because if those things are working, we just need to do more of that.
Yeah.
I mean, France has made a trouble. I mean, in France, they don't have integration. You have the banlieue, the area around Paris, where mostly North African immigrants live, and you have a terrible situation up there. And so there's a complete absence of integration. And I think what we need to do in this country, and what we do to a certain extent, is people don't assimilate, but they integrate. So they still keep their identity, and they value that. But I mean, every week I actually hand out the certificates for people's naturalisation as a sort of form of merit. And I always say to people, integrate by all means, follow them, but don't lose where you come from.
But what I would say also, just to be positive,
I was
is
being fairly
that
positive.
I went to a very diverse school, a girls' school. All of the girls from all different backgrounds are all doing absolutely fantastically in their different fields. I don't think there are so many obstacles holding people back in this country as there are in, well, the majority of the rest of the world, I would say.
Well, Roedean is a good school.
Pardon?
Roedean is an excellent school.
That was not Roedean.
Oh, Cheltenham Ladies College.
No, I was not at Cheltenham Ladies College, but I will not...
that was me there, actually. Oh, no. Funny. Stephen, we are staying with you because Mike Tyson appears to be getting involved in American politics now. Just when you thought it couldn't be any madder?
So did you?
It's me.
Looking at Mike Tyson and Donald Trump, they're in Florida at the UFC Universal Fight Club thing, and they're actually glaring at each other. And I suddenly thought, this is the answer to the next election. Never mind this, Ronda sanctimonious. Let's get Tyson and Trump. duke it out together. Let's see who's... But looking at the two of them, I think, who is the least appealing and the least attractive personality? One of them who bites people's ears off and the other one who grabs people's anatomy. I mean, I'm sorry. It's pretty awful.
Well, he's boasted about doing so.
Which is even worse.
Use the word anatomy, personally.
Yes, we don't want any genitals this early in the morning.
No, don't.
Maybe, though, rather than the fairly hideous adverts that aren't accurate and just a bit nasty, maybe we should get Sunak and Starmer in a boxing ring. What do you reckon? Sort it out.
Oh, sorry, Sunak couldn't knock the skin off a rice pudding. And I've played football with Keir Starmer. Believe you me, you would not want to be in a fight with him.
Oh, really?
He is a combative midfield general in the Roy Keane mould.
Oh, OK, so he has a fighting spirit there as well, then.
Fighting?
What, Keir Starmer's a boxer?
No, he's a footballer. He's a midfielder.
A footballer.
But when he feels merciful, he puts antiseptic on his studs.
Right, well, OK.
Really?
Well, I have not seen Starmer on the
Sorry, that's not serious, by the way.
Yes, Rishi Sunak isn't too blessed in the height department.
Oh yeah, but we can't actually write Sunak off. You do have the underdogs that do end up coming up trumps.
You've watched Rocky IV, haven't you?
Love a good underdog, I do.
Quick and nifty.
Yeah.
Under the.
Have we got time for one more? I think we've got time for one more. Right, one more story. This one is just intriguing, Bushra. I do not understand why you picked it, but you're going to tell me, aren't you? This is a story from the BBC, evidently, about the Dalai Lama and a spiritual leader's tongue.
Yes.
Go on.
Choose your words.
Right, obviously, it's the morning, so the words that I want to use, I'm not going to use.
Right,
but I have an array that I would describe this as. But basically, the Dalai Lama, this holy figure, ends up kissing this young Indian boy publicly in front of an audience and then says, "Suck my tongue," to him.
We have the video here.
Yeah.
There we are. Oh, goodness me.
Oh.
And then he's gonna... Oh. It's gross. It's awful.
Their foreheads together.
And now he's going to ask him to suck his tongue. Yeah. Hopefully we've got that part, which is the...
we're all stunned into silence here, which is not a good thing. If you're not watching, if you're listening to us on the radio now, this is the Dalai
Just
Lama.
thank your lucky stars.
And a little boy in front of him, and the Dalai Lama is sticking his tongue out and asking the little boy to put the Dalai Lama's tongue in his mouth, basically.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
Which is an unusual thing to do.
Yes, very unusual. And I love
to say the least.
And the fact that everyone else sitting around them is wearing a face mask.
But what's worse is this morning he's put out an apology statement saying that this is his way of love and endearment to young children by teasing them, and it's the most awful thing I've seen, because if that was my child, I would have jumped up on that stage and said, "Do not touch my child like that." And then you have a bunch of people that are actually endorsing this. So for me, it's grotesque.
Well, let's hope his motivations weren't perverted.
I was going to say, what was is a spiritual thing he was doing?
No, it was just a greeting. He was saying hello to this young boy that wanted to say hello to him. So he...
I've never greeted a random stranger, let alone a child, by sticking my tongue in their mouth.
But you're not the Dalai Lama.
But that doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it okay. Why is it always these older holy figures that are sexually deprived or abstaining that end up touching these young boys?
Allegedly.
Well, The trouble is, Prince Charles, when he goes to New Zealand, he rubs noses with people. Because when somebody will say to him, "Oh, next time you're in Nepal, this is what you do." "Oh, fair enough, that's what I'll do." It's going to be embarrassing, isn't it?
So we're actually telling Charles now at his coronation, if he happens to bump into
the Dalai Lama, stick your tongue out.
Stick your tongue in his mouth.
Gross.
That's fine.
But sometimes when you're greeting someone and you try to go for their cheek and then they go for the other cheek and you end up having a bit of a snog by mistake.
Oh, that old excuse.
Has it ever happened to you, Dawn?
That old excuse,
It can happen to anyone.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, especially after that bottle of wine, Emily. Yeah.
And that's how you end up sleeping on the studio floor.
Yes.
Yes.
Indeed.
Punishment.
Right, OK. And I think just one final quick word on Easter. It is Bank Holiday, Easter Monday. So have we all eaten too many eggs? Are we looking forward to a nice meal today?
I have barely eaten. We're fasting, obviously. And when we do open our fast, I can barely have couple of dates and water. But I will keep Easter eggs for after Ramadan, when I can enjoy food properly.
How long have you got to go?
We have 11 more days.
Oh my Lord!
11 more days. So we're on number 19.
What's it like when you're wall to wall, chocolate around you?
It's fine. The first few days is the most difficult, but then you just abstain and you're okay. But it's getting to the point where I cannot eat anything.
You eat when the sun goes down. Is that
Yes.
the rule?
Yeah,
Okay.
iftar, it's about 9 o'clock.
So you have a feast at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, but the thing is, we have Catholic Ramadan, or we call it Lent, and every year since I was 12, I've given up alcohol, which means that up until yesterday, I hadn't had a drink since Ash Wednesday. Yesterday,
Well done. You're probably feeling more sprightly as a result.
I'm feeling rather hungover. I only had 2 pints.
Okay, I'm just moving swiftly on and saying nothing. I've managed to give up absolutely nothing. Oh, right, we'll be right
You
back
had nothing
with
left to
all
give
the
up. You're so
the historic
ascetic.
anniversary of Good Friday Agreement, straight after the weather. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. We start the broadcast with a wind warning for Tuesday and Wednesday across western parts of the UK. The low pressure that's going to move in will bring some very strong winds and heavy rain to parts of the UK through Tuesday and into Wednesday. Tightening isobars indicate strong winds, 50, 60 miles an hour, possible around some coasts and also some heavy rain. So it will lead to some tricky travelling conditions during the second half of the Easter holidays. Through the afternoon today, we've got a mixture of sunny spells and heavy showers. Some of the showers contain some hail, some thunder, may merge to give some longer spells of rain too. But in between, there'll be some sunny spells. Some lucky ones will stay dry through the afternoon and temperatures lifting 14 or 15 Celsius. Though a gusty afternoon, so feeling a bit cooler than this. As we move into the evening, showers continue, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, stretching into northern England, southern Scotland for a time too, merging into some longer spells of rain. Overnight, we'll see some lengthy clear spells developing in between the showers, and this will allow it to turn quite chilly. Most places staying frost-free, but we could see a touch of grass frost in the countryside to start Tuesday morning. But it means blue skies to start the day, with the exception of this band of showers across central and western parts of Scotland, and also the cloud thickening from the southwest as we move through the morning. The wind strengthening too as these outbreaks of rain move in, pushing also into Northern Ireland, Wales by the time we get to the afternoon. Met Office warning coming in force, 50, 60 mile an hour wind gusts possible around the Irish Sea coast. Temperatures feeling quite cool for the time of year, 13 to 15 Celsius. And into the evening time, this heavy rain pushes north and eastwards, the far north of Scotland holding on to the driest weather for longest. Very windy, particularly around this area of low pressure as it moves northeastwards. And those winds continue to stay strong through Wednesday, particularly across the southwest of the UK. Further showers Thursday and Friday, and feeling quite cool too.
Good morning and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Dawn Neeson, and
Emily Carver.
Hey, and happy Easter Monday. It's a bank holiday. Hope you're having a lovely time so far. Don't go anywhere. Sit and watch us. It's raining outside. You don't want to go out. Right, OK, today, lots coming up. Starmer doubles down. The Labour leader says he stands by every word of a Labour Party advert that accuses Rishi Sunak of not wanting child abusers to go to jail, adding that it makes absolutely zero apologies for being blunt, no matter how squeamish it might make some people feel. Could it backfire, though?
I think it is a little bit. Rishi Sunak has called for a return in power sharing in Northern Ireland as he marks 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement. There is also the visit of President Joe Biden coming tomorrow.
Oh, in exciting times, isn't it? And meanwhile, the biggest ever rise in state pension kicked in today. The record 10.1% increase will still not keep pace with inflation, though, which unexpectedly rose to 10.4% last month. How unexpected was that exactly?
Well, there you go. Travelling in style, the King and Queen consort will head to the Coronation in a coach with air conditioning, electric windows and state-of-the-art suspension. How fancy. We'll have all the details of the Coronation route and discuss the controversial issue of ivory. Let us know your... Let us know all your thoughts on all of today's topics. As always, please do get in touch at gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll get stuck into all of those top stories in just one moment. But first, let's get the news headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Emily, thank you. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 1 minute past 11. Police in Northern Ireland are on high alert after the terror threat was raised over possible attacks targeting officers today. That's as the Prime Minister marks the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, urging the return of power-sharing instalment. Rishi Sunak, who will travel to Northern Ireland to host the US President Joe Biden tomorrow, also praised the bravery of the leaders who secured the deal. Former leader of the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland, Lord John Allardyce, says parties aren't facing the pressures of the past and must resolve their differences.
Negotiating in the middle of and after a huge, long, violent campaign is far more difficult than the process of negotiating now. We should be able to overcome the problems of the moment because they're not in the context of a violent terrorist campaign. And people need to remember that was the biggest difficulty we faced, and it's not a difficulty we have to face in the same way now.
NHS England says emergency care will be prioritised during the junior doctors' strike. The 4-day walkout, which begins tomorrow morning, is being described as the most disruptive industrial action in NHS history. The health body warns the dispute over pay will mean appointments and operations will be cancelled and there'll be immense pressure on both staff and services. The Labour leader has defended a campaign ad that targets the Prime Minister. The post suggests Rishi Sunak doesn't want child sex abusers to go to jail. Writing in the Daily Mail, Sir Keir Starmer says he makes zero apologies for the ad. That's despite criticism from MPs, including those from his own party, with Lord David Blunkett calling it gutter politics. Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry says the criminal justice system is lacking.
Keir Starmer has made it he's dedicated his life to ensuring that the criminal justice system works properly. And he feels very strongly about this and is being very blunt about it. And yeah, we stand by this. If Rishi Sunak really wanted to stop child sex offenders from staying out of jail, he could do something about it, but he is not doing anything about it. They are not taking their failures seriously, and they should be doing a great deal more than they are.
People receiving the state pension will see their payments increase by 10.1% from today. The move was confirmed by the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, in the autumn statement. Depending on the pension, weekly payments will rise to either £156 or £203. State Economics Advisor Vicky Price says the rise is long overdue.
Last year, they should have got a very substantial increase because earnings were rising very fast after COVID, when, of course, earnings fell during that period. But they didn't. They only got the 2.5% instead of maybe 8 or 9% they would have got otherwise. So this is up to a point, sort of going back to where we were, but a bit of a compensation, because by comparison to what's going on across the economy, particularly in the public sector, pay rises have not kept in line with inflation.
Ukraine says it's repelled more than 40 enemy attacks over the past 24 hours as Russia steps up strikes on key cities. Bakhmut and Avdiivka near Donetsk are among the areas involved in the heaviest fighting. Meanwhile, a 50-year-old man and his daughter were killed after a missile struck a residential building in the southeastern town of Zaporizhzhia. Russia's defence ministry says its forces destroyed a depot with 70,000 tonnes of fuel near the town. The King and Queen Consort will travel to the coronation at Westminster Abbey in a comfortable, air-conditioned, horse-drawn carriage. They'll ride in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, first used in 2014, before returning in a shorter procession in the Gold State Coach. The Gold Carriage, which dates back to 1831, weighs 4 tonnes. And to mark the 21st century ceremony, a special emoji has also been created. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Dawn and Emily.
Good morning and welcome back. It's Dawn Neeson and Emily Carver here, and we are talking Labour leader Keir Starmer says he makes absolutely zero apologies, actually, not just zero apologies for that ad campaign that has provoked anger from within his own political party, regardless of how squeamish it makes people feel.
Yes, from initially accusing the Prime Minister of thinking child sex abusers shouldn't go to prison, Labour followed up with ads on adults convicted of firearms possession and theft.
Earlier on, a breakfast asked Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry why Labour were targeting the government on crime.
It is disgraceful. They do not take this matter seriously, and Labour does, and Keir Starmer does, and we're going to do something about it. We cannot continue to have too few police, too few arrests, too long waits to get into court, and then when you get to court, then the judge is being told by the Lord Chief Justice to think twice about sending people to prison because the prisons are so crowded. That's how bad it is, and when people are released, they're not being supervised properly and they go off and commit more crimes.
Well, there you go, Emily Thornberry there, doubling down on the ad campaign. Joining us for more analysis is GB News political reporter Olivia Utley. Good morning, Olivia. Thank you for coming on the show. So Emily Thornberry doubling down, supporting Keir Starmer, leader of the party. They do have a point, though, when it comes to convictions and then people being sent to jail for heinous crimes like sexual assault.
Absolutely, and it's a point that very much resonates with the public. And that is why, in some ways, it's quite a clever strategy. The issue of short sentences and rising crime comes up again and again in focus groups across the country. And we know that both Labour and Tory strategists are watching these focus groups with a hawk eye because, you know, we're coming up to election period now. The issues which are troubling the public are the ones that Labour is desperate to focus on. It's also obviously a classic kind of shock technique. It causes a controversy. People are up in arms about it. People within the Labour Party are annoyed about it. People at home who are perhaps more engaged in politics sort of see it for what it is, as a sort of dirty tactic. But in the country at large, there will be people who will just be looking at the newspaper and think, oh, or looking at Twitter and think, oh, Rishi Sunak isn't fussed about child abusers being in prison. So you've got the kind of turning it into a talking point, especially during a sort of quiet news weekend over a bank holiday. The fact that we're sitting here talking about it now shows that it does have some sort of cut-through, as it were, with the public. So in some ways, it could be quite a clever strategy. On the other hand, there is an argument that it actually makes Keir Starmer look a bit weak because this isn't the image that he's cultivated of himself. Over the past few years, he has been the kind of constructive opposition leader. He's gone to huge lengths to show that he's very different from Jeremy Corbyn and that under him, Labour is sort of kinder and gentler, to coin a phrase. And so now to sort of take off his gloves, get the claws out and resort to these dirty tactics suggests that someone else is advising him to behave like this. And it makes people wonder, you know, who exactly is Keir Starmer? So it'll be very interesting to see whether it pays off, what happens with the polling this week, because we know that Labour is getting a little bit desperate in that although the lead is still considerably ahead of the Tories, it's pretty large, it is closing week on week. So Labour can't afford to be too complacent.
What I find astonishing with a newspaper print background about this story, if I'd have printed that in the newspaper in black and white, that Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak rather, does not think paedophiles should go to prison, I could have been sued. Because it's on social media, you feel like, you can get away with saying that slow. Well, you seriously can't, obviously.
It'll be interesting to see if Rishi Sunak bothers, because perhaps Sunak could sue the Labour Party
on social
for
media,
this,
though,
but I don't
isn't it?
think it would be worth his time. No. I think he should just sit this one out, not really remark upon it, take the higher ground.
I think that's probably what he will do, but he knows that he needs to seize this area of crime before Labour steal his clothes, as it were. And in the run-up to the budget, Labour talked a lot about each shadow minister came out and explained what their plan was for their policy area. And quite a few of them, the Tories ended up announcing in the budget. So Bridget Phillipson, the Education Shadow Secretary of State, did a long speech about childcare, which is very interesting, and most of those policies were picked up by the Conservative government. So Labour is now trying to sort of seize the space, as it were, of violent crime. And yes, I think Rishi Sunak will probably want to sit out this particular kind of Twitter controversy, but he does have to find a way to show that he has some leadership, that he's leading from the front on this issue, because it really does resonate with the public.
Now, Emily Thornberry hinted this morning on The Breakfast Show that there was more of this to come. There was another advert due to be released this afternoon. Do we know what that's about? Well, which particular policy they're targeting with that one?
It'll be really interesting to see, but they are doubling down on this area, and it's all... I reckon it'll be somewhere where the Tories traditionally have more legitimacy. So obviously crime, the economy, immigration are the obvious policy areas where Labour want to show that, they can be the old-fashioned Tory party. They can do what the Tories are doing better. And that's going to be where they double down in the weeks ahead.
Leading on paedophiles is quite a statement. You're not going to get much more reach than that, are you, when it comes to social media campaigns? Anyway, let's get some more analysis from the former Labour advisor and author, Kevin Marr. Kevin, thank you for joining us. Good morning, Kevin. There he is. Kevin, thank you very much indeed. You have been a Labour advisor. You're an author too. Would you have advised Keir Starmer to, have this kind of campaign?
It's a departure. It's a new departure, I think. I think the people around him will be thinking this was always going to be a bit bumpy. It was always going to upset people with this particular kind of line of attack. But I think they'll be relieved that actually, here we are. It was posted on Thursday. It was a tweet. It probably took some designer about 20 minutes to produce this thing, and it's had now 22 million views and dominated a kind of domestic political coverage over the Easter period. So in many respects, it's a slam dunk success. Now it comes at a cost potentially, as Olivia was saying there, that this is perhaps a different depiction of Keir Starmer than we've been used to. This is him being very blunt, and as you say, writing in a piece in the Daily Mail today, he's not resiling from any of this at all. He's actually doubling down, as the phrase of the hour goes, that he has no regrets about trying to sort of slam Rishi Sunak on crime. No, it's interesting because the Conservatives said, look, Rishi Sunak wasn't even an MP until 2015, and you're holding him to account for the record of the current Conservative government over 13 years since 2010. And that's kind of the point, really, that sits behind some of this, that Keir Starmer is very conscious that Rishi Sunak is, new in post and people may give him the benefit of the doubt. And he is trying to tie Rishi Sunak to the 13-year record of the Conservatives to say, there's no place for you to hide. You're a Conservative Prime Minister right now, but you own the full legacy, the full record, and I'm going to hold you directly to account for it. So that's one of the key purposes in there as well. But I think the issue is that if he can make some inroads on crime, it's a shortcut in two respects. It kind of says, I will be a strong prime minister. This will be a strong government. It's about fitness to office, that we're fit to run the country. And it's also a big departure from the Jeremy Corbyn years, because a lot of the people that are obviously in the Labour Party that are criticising this poster on the kind of liberal left, Keir Starmer doesn't need to win these people round. He's kind of got them. He needs to win over lots of millions of other ordinary Britons for whom crime is a real everyday concern. And so that's where he's pivoting his strategies to say, look, I've got some of these people complaining and having a go at me about this. In a sense, that's not unhelpful, because it shows that, look, I'm prepared to be very tough, aggressive, ruthless is the word that he's used several times in the last couple of weeks, to say, look, I've got to win an election. I can't be,
I've
got to go for it.
Sorry to interrupt, but one of the criticisms of Keir Starmer, and I don't know how you feel about him as a leader of the Labour Party, but one of the criticisms has been that he sort of flip-flops. He sits on the fence, goes with the wind. He's talking big on crime because some polling data has shown him that he needs to do that. He's not being too liberal on immigration, even though we know that he probably is very liberal on immigration in his own beliefs. Brexit, we'll make the best of Brexit, after he campaigned for a second referendum for God knows how long. How is he going to prove to the country that he is, the true Keir Starmer? Who is the real Keir Starmer?
He's got a very difficult inheritance. I mean, the Labour Party performed very badly in 2019, the lowest number of Labour MPs returned since 1935. And what he's trying to do is to say, look, we've already lost 4 general elections in a row. I don't want that to be a 5th. And what he's trying to do is press the fast forward on the Labour Party's modernisation. You go back to, sort of Neil Kinnock in the 1980s and John Smith before Tony Blair. There was a long period where Labour incrementally moved forward, had lots of policy reviews, lots of battles about changing policy and all the rest of it. It took a very long time. And what Starmer's tasked with doing basically is to say, can he move warp speed from the position in 2019 to a completely different position in 2024 and win a general election? Now, it's an absolutely huge task. It always has been. It doesn't matter whether it's Keir Starmer or Lisa Nandy or Yvette Cooper. It doesn't matter who the leader of the Labour Party is. The task is still the same, and it requires repositioning the party, often quite dramatically, from where it's been even just a handful of years ago. So yes, you can sort of say, look, 3 or 4 years ago you were saying this, now you're saying that. I mean, I think the point is that Starmer is saying, look, I will do whatever I have to do to position the Labour Party in a place where it's going to win an election and be able to govern, and I will hold and pin that position down as I do it. So the things that I've said before, discount those. The things I'm saying now are the things I would actually do.
Kevin, moving on to the other big political story of the day, the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, where indeed the target of these attacks, Rishi Sunak, is over in Northern Ireland at the moment, and Joe Biden is flying in tomorrow. How do you think this is playing out? Well, is it something that people are happy to celebrate, or are we still unsure? I mean, Stormont hasn't sat for nearly 2 years now. Is the political situation still very, very volatile in that country?
It is. I mean, look, Northern Ireland was not probably built to last, and it's never been built to work very well. Bluntly, we've had 102 years of Northern Ireland. For the first 5 decades, it was a Protestant unionist fief, and all the discrimination against the Catholic nationalist community, which unfortunately then led to the civil rights movement in the 1960s rather, and the brutal suppression of that led to the Troubles. So we've had 50 years of terrible state-sponsored discrimination, 30 years of terrible internecine violence with 3,600 people lost their lives, and we've had 25 years of stop-start political progress. And I say progress because it is progress, because the guns and the bombs have been put to one side, and it isn't perfect up at Stormont. I mean, the devolved institutions, the Assembly and the Executive, haven't even met for 40% of the time. And as you say, we currently have a hiatus even now. But in a moment, it's instantly preferable to everything that went before it. Northern Ireland has always been a disaster, frankly. And this period that we're in, this 25 years where the Unionists on one side, Nationalists on the other, Republicans, Loyalists have managed to kind of coalesce and move some things forward. Now, there are lots of difficulties still there, lots of trials and tribulations, lots of animosities, lots of, bone rubbing against bone, if I can put it like that. I mean, it's not a great success in terms of how we might view it on this side of the Irish Sea. But it's a hell of a lot better than everything that went before it. And there is a moment where the politicians from from Joe Biden and Bill Clinton, who are both in town this week, through to unionists that led their people into the deal, Republicans and nationalists on the other side, that everybody can say, well, this was a moment where politicians come in for a lot of stick, and often deservedly so. But this is a moment where politics kind of worked.
But they achieved something.
Negotiation and compromise worked. Yes, I think they definitely
achieved
did.
something incredible. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, Kevin, but that is all we've got time for on that one. But thank you very much indeed for your analysis there. Very astute indeed. Kevin Marr, former Labour advisor and an author there. Thank you very much indeed. I'm not sure about what he was saying about Keir Starmer. With the, he's just showing he's a man who wants power. But I think some people think he'll say anything to get that power. That's the worry.
Don't you think, Emily? I think look, the point of politics is to win the next election. So I think they're all saying what they think will get them the next election. It's what they do when they're elected. What I'm not hearing, and the viewers and the listeners not hearing, is what are you actually going to do when you're in power and how financially you're going to back it up. We don't hear that from Keir Starmer.
We need some more, Keir, if you're watching. Anyway, as we've been mentioning, the Prime Minister, which is still Rishi Sunak, has underlined that the defining message of the landmark deal is compromise and urged parties in Northern Ireland to work together for a better future.
It comes as the PM prepares, as we just discussed, to meet with US President Joe Biden tomorrow evening as he steps off Air Force One in Belfast. Our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, has this story for us.
There's also very strong community intelligence specifically coming forward in respect of Monday's events in Derry, Londonderry, and a real concern that there may be attempts to draw police in to serious public disorder and to use that then as a platform to launch terrorist attacks on police as well. So going into our operation, that's something that is very clearly right at the forefront of my mind.
PSNI Assistant Chief Constable Bobby Singleton briefs the press as to the terrorist threat that faces his officers later today. And the US President Joe Biden will now only attend one event in Belfast.
I generally think it is absolutely not a snub. I'm delighted he's coming to Northern Ireland, and I'm absolutely sure he'll be pleased with the progress that he will see Northern Ireland's made over the last 25 years.
25 years ago, Belfast was a very different place. Never mind the lack of infrastructure, it was more dangerous to live here than it was in Beirut. The Good Friday Agreement brought many changes, most of them along local governance, policing and community projects. But who did it leave behind?
So the young men need to feel wanted. They need to be made wanted. This will keep them out of criminality, keep them out of trouble. They'll be taken away from drugs. The government should be setting up different liaison groups and bringing the young men forward out of these situations that they find themselves in.
Boxing coach Ian McSorley has been working alongside young men from the loyalist Sandy Row area of South Belfast. These men don't appear to fit in the academic route.
So the government needs to step in here. Obviously, what has went on in the past hasn't worked. There needs to be new initiatives for encouragement and get them out of the current situation that they are in.
Brian Caskey is from the other side of Belfast, a project worker that also encourages those young men in cross-community groups.
I think it's just people took the eye off the ball in relation to what the needs are for these communities. I felt that there was a lack of a strategic plan in relation to where the area was going to go over maybe the next 10 or 15 years. That doesn't exist. So as a result of that, there maybe is a wee bit of limbo and lack of investment, a lot of strategic planning, and I think that's where it's gone wrong. And then a lot of us are left then to work with the young people and try and give them those opportunities that maybe we thought they would already exist. So I think it's a lack of investment, lack of clear strategic direction.
Ray is the chairman of Limestone United, that bridges both sides of the peace walls.
So the only way forward is to educate the young ones, get them into politics. It's our future, not ours. We've had ours.
Dougie Beattie, GB News, Belfast.
Oh, well, we hope we never go back to the dark times of the Troubles. Right, OK, still to come. Junior doctors are staging a 4-day walkout. We'll tell you why in just a second. This is To The Point.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:27 a.m. You're with To The Point on GB News with me, Dawn Neeson, and
Emily Carver.
Yay, we're getting this off pat now, aren't we? Right, OK. Well, thank you all for getting in touch, by the way. Thank you so much for saying nice things about Emily and I.
We have. We've had a flood of lovely messages, but we want to talk about something that we were talking about in the paper review earlier. This report that shows that, a third of ethnic minorities say that they still experience.
This is the front page of The Guardian,
verbal abuse, racial abuse, physical abuse. You've had lots of interesting thoughts. Virginia said, Dee says, things have changed massively since the 60s. I'm white and have experienced racism. It goes both ways. Yes, I think it is possible to experience racism. Joyce says white working class males are discriminated against more than ethnic minorities. Well, we do see that in terms of university spots, white working class boys aren't going.
And education, I mean, they are the lowest, aren't they?
Yeah.
They fare the worst.
In terms of attainment.
And it goes back to the point we were talking about earlier on this subject, Alan. Thank you for your message. Is there any country in the world that is totally racially tolerant? And I think that's probably the question here, because as much as we complain about our own country, I think we do pretty well compared to so many around the world.
I heard an Australian yesterday on the channel talking about the monarchy, and she was saying that Australia is a human minestrone. And I quite like that phrase. An alternative to a melting pot, I think.
Actually, yes. I guess
a human minestrone.
So minestrone, it sounds sort of like melting. We need to move on from melting pot, though. We need something better. Well, let us know. What do you think? I mean, are we more racially tolerant? I mean, is the situation getting worse? Let us know, GB News.
To be honest, I think whatever colour you are, you can have a very decent life in this country. I think that is true.
I think it's actually women are getting discriminated quite a bit these days as well. Just saying, though, and that's why Emily are here putting it right. But let's know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Right, well, moving on. Up to 250,000 operations and appointments could be postponed by this week's junior doctor strike.
Right, OK, yeah, starting at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, patients are likely to see more of an impact because the 4-day walkout comes after the Easter weekend.
Here to discuss this is GP and former chair of the BMA's General Practitioners Committee, Dr. Lawrence Buckman. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Lawrence. Do you support these strikes?
I'm not really enthusiastic for any strikes with healthcare workers, but I understand why they're doing it, and I'm very sympathetic to their aims. I think it's very sad it's come to this.
Why do you think it has come to this? I mean, you know, the government is saying, look, you know, we are willing to talk, but we need realistic expectations. At the moment, the demand is for a 35% wage rise.
Yeah, most of that is catching up. Most of that is not a stonking big pay rise. I know it looks like one, but like most other public sector workers, their pay has been held down as a regulator of inflation and other things within the wider economy. I think both sides should have been talking to each other. There should be no preconditions, and I think that's a mistake. And I think the Secretary of State's unwillingness to talk until the strike threat is withdrawn is naive and probably going to get nowhere. These two sides are going to have to talk eventually. They might as well talk now.
Are doctors particularly hard done by? Depending on the data you see, doctors can very quickly go up the pay scale. Depending on which area they go into, they can earn extra overtime, etc., can pick up more hours. Are they particularly hard done by, or is everyone just feeling the squeeze of inflation?
I think there's two separate things, and I think we kid ourselves if it's just about money. Money is clearly very important. All of us would like a pay rise, but if you double my pay, I'm just as tired. So I don't think we should pretend it's all about money. I think junior doctors have been very unfairly treated vis-à-vis the rest of the National Health Service. And I think there are various constructive ways they could have sorted this out. They, I mean both sides, could have sorted this out if they would have wanted to. And that's why I suggest there's more to this. And what's more is that junior doctors have been very badly treated, not about money, about the way they've had to work, about the student loans that they have to pay back, many of them for a very long time. Remember, a junior doctor is anyone who's not a consultant or a GP, and some of them are not remotely junior. The pay scales dawdle up quite slowly. There's obviously a big leap when you become a consultant, but by and large, that doesn't happen. So I think the idea that this is just about money and not about some of the very unfair practices that have gone on within the health service over the last 10 or 15 years, I think you have to just remember these are very angry people. And you won't just fill their mouths with gold and make them go quietly.
Dr. Lawrence, just one very, very final quick question for you. I mean, the people that are going to be angry over the next 4 days are the 250,000 patients who are expected to be affected by this. I mean, what message do you have for them?
I think many of them will be less affected than they think because a lot of consultants and GPs and others are stepping into the space that the juniors are not filling. Also, the waiting list is so enormous that 250,000 more, it's dreadful, but actually it's not such a surprisingly huge number.
God,
it sounds huge.
It's as bad as this, so may as well make it worse.
Let's just make it worse. Well, right, I'm not quite sure how to answer that one. Dr. Lawrence, unfortunately, we have to go now. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Dr. Lawrence Buckman there on the NHS strikes that are starting the next 4 days.
I do wonder if the NHS is just what needs to change. Anyway.
Well, it's political, isn't it? Right, still to come, we have more on all the controversial Labour adverts and if they could be the start of more aggressive political campaigning. That's after your morning news with the very lovely Tamsin Robert.
Dawn, thank you so much. It's 11:34. Here are the headlines from the GB newsroom. Police in Northern Ireland are on high alert after the terror threat was raised over possible attacks targeting officers today. That's as the Prime Minister marks the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, urging the return of power-sharing instalment. Rishi Sunak, who will travel to Northern Ireland to host the US President Joe Biden tomorrow, also praised the bravery of the leaders who secured the deal. NHS England says emergency care will be prioritised during the junior doctor strike. The 4-day walkout, which begins tomorrow morning, is being described as the most disruptive industrial action in NHS history. The health body warns the dispute over pay will mean appointments and operations will be cancelled, and there'll be immense pressure on both staff and services. Labour will launch more ads attacking the Prime Minister, blaming him for crashing the economy. Sir Keir Starmer has defended the first post targeting Rishi Sunak, which suggests he doesn't want child sex abusers to go to jail. Writing in the Daily Mail, Sir Keir Starmer says he makes zero apologies for the ad. That's despite criticism from MPs, including those from his own party, with Lord David Blunkett calling it gutter politics. The King and Queen Consort will travel to the Coronation at Westminster Abbey in a comfortable, air-conditioned, horse-drawn carriage. They'll ride in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, first used in 2014, before heading to Buckingham Palace in a shorter procession in the Gold State Coach. And to mark the 21st century ceremony, a special crown emoji has also been created. TV, online, radio and tune in. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dawn and Emily.
Thanks, Tamsin. In just a few moments, we'll be going through the biggest stories again in today's papers. This is To The Point. We'll be back in just one moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, dear Lord. Right, OK, welcome back. It is 11:39. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Dawn Neeson, and...
Emily Carver.
Yay.
Nailed it.
We've come dressed as a fruit bowl this morning just to liven up your day. Right, OK, it's time for a fun part of the show to look through some of the stories making headlines today. And to do that, we're joined by a perfect political commentator, Bushra Sheikh, as well as former Labour MP.
Imperfect.
Who's kind of perfect too, Stephen Pound. I'm very naughty.
We're dishing out too many compliments. They're going to think we're insincere.
No, I actually mean every word of it.
Okay.
I mean, they are both very lovely, and it's like, and we do look like a fruit bowl. Sorry.
We believe you, we believe you.
Right. OK, so now, should we do some views first? Because you've been getting in touch.
Yes.
Saying some really lovely things this morning.
Yes, there have been a few on politics in general, actually, just some thoughts. David says he feels middle-class liberalism has taken over both parties, presumably Labour and the Conservatives. It allows Tories to fast-track globalism and Labour Liberals with no idea of what the real TUC once stood for. Before the Thatcher government sadly destroyed the Labour Party, snobbery has propped up the Tories. Not many of the younger generation see themselves as working class. Well, there's a mixture of thoughts there, but I think I get what you mean. The parties are becoming quite similar, and it seems like Keir Starmer is actually trying to make that the case.
It's very
with some
much
of his campaigning.
Very much Tony Blair type thing going on there, isn't it? I mean,
is that what you want, Tony Blair?
Oh, gosh, please, that's frightening. He's in Northern Ireland. Right, let's go. Peter, I'm with you on this morning, Peter. Good morning, by the way. For me, the word politician is synonymous with the words incompetent and corruption.
Harsh.
But true.
Stephen.
I don't know how to answer that, in all honesty. It's over. No, I mean, the point is, if you say that, if you say all politics are corrupt and incompetent, then basically, who runs the country? Do you want a dictatorship? If you want to have a dictatorship, you don't have to look very far. Just look to Moscow and see what happens if you've got a dictator. I'd rather have an incompetent democrat than a fascistic dictator.
And I think there is a danger as well, joking aside, of demonising politicians. We all saw what happened with Joe Cox
That's true.
And David Amess in Southend, both ironically very, very good politicians, doing it for all the right reasons and very much caring about their constituents. So I think we do have to be careful with the rhetoric around some of the politics, which is why it's very depressing that the Labour Party and Keir Starmer are resorting to these personal attacks on Rishi Sunak.
Also, there are a lot of people, a lot of our politicians could be doing something else. And some of them do genuinely do it because they want to make a difference in the area. But does power corrupt? Who knows? We shall see. Anyway, we should move on to our first story in the papers. Stephen, you're going to be talking about this glamorous royal carriage.
Yeah,
air conditioning.
This is absolutely marvellous. So, yeah, the coronations don't come along every day. I mean, I'm probably the only person in this city who remembers the last coronation, and I remember it quite well. But the thing is, they used the royal stagecoach, which had been used by Elizabeth I. And, in fact, it used to be parked up in the Mews, just off Whitehall there. And it was a fairly basic bone shaker. Prince Charles, however, and I'm not implying that he's some sort of milquetoast millennial who wants luxury with everything.
Milquetoast?
Yeah, well,
What's milquetoast?
Wimp.
A wimpy man.
But he's now got a completely... It's sort of a Toyota Prius of royal coaches now. And it hasn't got an engine. If it did have an engine, it would be running on sunflower oil, and he'd be obviously asking the sunflowers, first of all, whether it's all right with it. But it's got air conditioning, heating, sprung seats, and it's an extraordinary piece of work. Now, surely the point is to actually look backwards and look forwards. Look backwards to Queen Elizabeth I, her stagecoach, the one that his mother used for the coronation. Do we really need something that's going to be used once every, actually, who knows how many years? Prince George was looking a bit sprightly yesterday. Who knows? But I'm sorry. God love you, Prince Charles. You've got King Charles. You've got some good points. But to jazz up this, pimp my ride for the royal stagecoach is not a good look.
Actually,
pimp my ride.
We have our little exclusive on this coach, don't we? Because apart.
Is that how you got here today?
Pardon? Yeah, it's parked down in the garage, mate, yeah. Actually got the tube, which I had to wait 10 minutes for. But the royal carriage actually has, it's a little bit, the interior of it has little bits of wood from very historical places all around the world, actually, in the Commonwealth. But a part of the wood in there is taken from Princess Diana's ancestral home. Also, so,
Althrop, yeah.
Yes, the very late Princess Diana will actually be...
Really?
Absolutely, yes. It's a world exclusive. I'm good, aren't I?
But there was an amazing thing. When they found one of the Elizabethan stagecoaches, written in a diamond, somebody had scratched inside, "Fain would I climb, yet fear I to fall." Obviously one of her potential. And some in her writing, underneath it was, "If thy heart faileth thee, climb not at all." And it was because people, it's like Dutch graffiti, but, you know, in the 16th century.
Gosh, rather emotional, I feel now.
Yes, absolutely.
After that.
Yeah.
Should we move on to Bushra?
Yes.
What have you got for us?
Tate brothers. So talking about Andrew Tate, Tristan Tate. So we know that they were arrested and were arrested for more than 3 months, and then finally they've...
Remind our viewers of who they are and why they're controversial.
Right, Andrew Tate, Tristan Tate, two brothers. Andrew Tate, obviously, has been known for his misogynistic
to put it
rhetoric out there, to put it in very simple terms. He's incredibly popular, though. So, we have to understand that he's so popular with the youngsters now at the moment, and he feels like, or they feel like he's somebody that they can look up to. So at the moment, I believe... they have alleged charges against them with trafficking of women. So this case is ongoing. But what's interesting, they are now out at the moment, moved to house arrest. But what I find really unusual with the story is that how long does it take for an investigation to take place? Because it's been more than 120 days and they still haven't got anything concrete.
They must be trying to build a case, but struggling, perhaps.
Yeah.
What do you think, Dawn?
We don't know about the Bucharesti, the Romanian legal system, but I think one of the fascinating things about the Tates is that their father was the first ever black chess grandmaster.
Yes.
I think extraordinary thing. Where did it all go wrong?
I mean, the videos that he does perform, whatever
foul.
you call it, on TikTok, they are foul.
Yeah.
They are.
Questions are to be asked about whether boys, young men, have enough good role models.
Well, I'd never even heard of these two before they were arrested, and then I started looking into who they were and the things they said. Now, that's because I don't have any cross-reference base with the young men today. And you start looking at the videos, and as a woman, certainly as an older woman, it's like absolutely appalling what they're saying. And it's just astonishing how popular they are online, though.
I think I understand it, because there's so much about women nowadays, so much about equal opportunities for women, girl power, etc., etc. We need to be talking about how men,
I'm going to be a little bit controversial, but I'm actually a fan of Andrew Tate.
Goodness, really?
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of Andrew Tate, and this idea of role models, I genuinely believe that he could be one of them. And his TikTok videos and social media presence is very conflicting. Some of his content is taken out of context, which is really important. But I have been following him for like a long time, and his growth has been remarkable. And I'm still waiting on the, innocent until proven guilty. So I'm waiting for that. And I think anyone that does anything like that should be charged and should face a sentence if that's the case.
Bushra, you're a very independent, feisty young woman. You surely can't agree with some of the views he has about women and a women's role basically in the kitchen and the bedroom.
Yeah, exactly.
OK, I do not agree with 100% of stuff that he says, but he says a lot of things that I do agree with. And it's not that he says that a woman's role is to be in the kitchen and the bedroom. That's not what he says. When you actually look at what he tries to build as a picture as a whole, he does really champion women's independence. But this equality that people talk about, that men and women should be equal, I don't think men and women are equal. I think we're different, but we have a different role to play. So I am quite traditional in that sense.
Yeah.
So when people do speak to me,
He does talk about men taking personal responsibility and things like that. The sort of things that Jordan Peterson used to say about how, you have to get out of bed in the morning, make your bed, look after your family, etc., etc. So some positive things, but then the sort of woman is your property things, I don't really like that.
Personal responsibility.
But no, it's the idea that women are there to be protected and cosseted, and I'm sorry, I believe in equality, and I think, and this foul misogyny.
A lot of women do like to be looked after, though.
Yeah, you can do it from a respectful perspective. You don't have to somehow demean and hold the woman down in that particular way. Don't say, you can't do this without, the man, the great saviour, helping her. But I see him sitting there, bare-chested, smoking a cigar, going on about, women using words that I wouldn't use. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's grim.
I just feel
it's the rise of the alpha male. That's what's happening.
But he preaches to the incels.
It's a backlash against society, the way society has been going. Anyway, we must move on to the Daily Star, which always has a fantastic front page.
Well, I mean, moving from the sublime to ridiculous, quite literally, aren't we here? Basically, we're talking the front page of the Daily Star. I'm just going to...
Are you in there today?
No. What day is it? I have no idea.
What day is it?
Monday.
Basically, I'm not... my name is Dawn, but I am not a prawn.
Britain's premier news channel. And the question today is, what day is it?
Right, OK, there. Can we see that now? Right, OK, there you go. Right. Boffs warn E.T. is a prawn.
Right.
OK, who's talking about this and why have you picked it? I've just write a column for this newspaper. I don't do the headlines.
No. The theory now is that there's this exploratory mission to Jupiter, which is, there's certain similarities. And people are saying, don't look out for ETs and don't look out for, sort of scary monsters and Chewbaccas. Look out for a prawn-shaped thing. Apparently, Jupiter may be populated by prawns. Now, that's going to be pretty terrifying because if they are, what will happen is Jamie Oliver will seize the lot, boil them up and serve them in garlic. But it's...
yummy.
No, stop it.
I'd like a prawn in garlic, don't you?
Well, it's a bit Lagostini to me, but...
You're talking about eating E.T. Come on, you can't eat E.T.
I'm a bit hungry this morning.
I used to love E.T. E.T.'s such a wonderful film.
Yeah.
Very emotional.
Yes.
Very sweet. I think it'll probably look very, very dated indeed if we watch it again right now.
Beverley...
Our producer watched it the other day.
Yes, who probably needs to get out slightly more. But, I mean, the thing is, the reason the Daily Star does this is because it sells, because people want escapism from all the boring, horrible...
But listen, the Daily Star probably
stories.
has the best head... It has one of the finest columnists, without a shadow of a doubt, but it also has brilliant front pages. Absolutely brilliant.
They have been quite satirical, especially about politics at the moment. Okay, Bushra, let's go to one of your stories now, changing the subject swiftly. The Daily Telegraph even. Hindu vigilante groups in India. What's happening there?
So you've got the rise of the Modi's BJP party, known as the Hindutva movement, and there's a rise of vigilante groups which are anti-Muslim in India. And this particular story is about cows and beef eating. So they've stepped up the game when Modi said that they are now going to tackle Muslim people that want to eat beef. So this is what it's about. And I mean, the worst part for me about this story was that last month, 2 young Muslim men, they were abducted by these Hindu vigilantes and they were burnt to death in a village called Haryana. I mean, for me, this is... It's startling because my concern is how these groups and this movement of Hindutva is seeping into the UK with small pockets. And we are seeing it in some parts of the UK. And there is a huge rise of anti-Muslim rhetoric.
We don't want to see this seep onto our streets.
No,
that's for sure. We don't want violence from abroad coming here. But in terms of the violence, you said a couple of people were burnt, presumably alive.
Yeah.
What other types of violence are these vigilante groups?
Well, I think the main premise of it is they're trying to arrest as many people as they can because obviously the cow is sacred to Hindus. But the intensifying campaign is we get that they are animals, but is a human life not worth more than the cow? So you've got thousands of people that are being arrested and going to prison. They're effectively criminalising your diet.
Yeah, well, we'll be keeping an eye on that.
Well, it's an interesting story, isn't it? Because, I mean, it's Easter weekend. It's Easter Bank Holiday Monday. And, we've all been celebrating Easter. It's also Ramadan. And also Passover. So all big 3 religious festivals will coincide at the same time. And yet we're still hearing these horrific stories where religion is causing so much angst and upset in the world.
Well, more wars have been started over water than they have over religion. But religion comes a close second.
Just honestly...
But I think what horrifies about this is one of the chief ministers, I'm not sure if it was in Haryana, said that when you attack the cows, you're attacking our mothers and our daughters. And if there's a place called Ayodhya in India, which was... nobody knows whether it was originally a Hindu temple or a mosque. And the battles, to this day, people are fighting over it. And I think one of the problems is if you've got internal problems, and there are huge internal problems in India, the oldest political trick in the world is to concentrate on the external enemy. It's what Napoleon did, la patrie en danger. You know, they've got problems inside, you say, oh, and look what Putin is doing at the moment. Putin, you know, Russia's a basket case, but he says, but NATO are coming for us, therefore, you know.
Yeah, it's the dead cat theory, isn't it? Chuck a dead cat on the table. We'll all talk about that instead.
I was
We've
just,
got time for one
building
more,
up to that.
Very quickly, one more. Which one should we go for?
Oh, go for Amar Lateef.
Go on then.
Go on, that's a feel-good story, isn't it?
Yeah, Amar Lateef, one of the finest human beings the world has ever known. He's just been made president of the Ramblers Association. He's a Scottish guy who's blind. He suffered from degenerative optical disease when he was young. He did this pilgrimage walk with Adrian Chiles, a great man, and he's done these marvellous walks. He is a gentle, sweet, charming man who has not let his disability just distract him from doing what he wants to do. He's a great guy. He's president of the Ramblers Association. Vote for Amar Lateef. If he stood for Parliament, by Lord, there should be a landslide.
Very good. What a lovely, uplifting story to end.
It is a lovely story. Right, we've come to the end of the show. It's flown by again.
It has, actually.
Have a wonderful Easter Monday. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Langos. This is The Point with Dawn and Emily. I'll be back with Andrew tomorrow at 9:30.
Lovely.
Have a lovely day. Thank you for watching.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. We start the broadcast with a wind warning for Tuesday and Wednesday across western parts of the UK. The low pressure that's going to move in will bring some very strong winds and heavy rain to parts of the UK through Tuesday and into Wednesday. Tightening isobars indicate strong winds, 50, 60 miles an hour, possible around some coasts and also some heavy rain. So it will lead to some tricky travelling conditions during the second half of the Easter holidays. Through the afternoon today, we've got a mixture of sunny spells and heavy showers. Some of the showers contain some hail, some thunder, may merge to give some longer spells of rain too. But in between, there'll be some sunny spells. Some lucky ones will stay dry through the afternoon and temperatures lifting 14 or 15 Celsius. Though a gusty afternoon, so feeling a bit cooler than this. As we move into the evening, showers continue, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, stretching into northern England, southern Scotland for a time too, merging into some longer spells of rain. Overnight, we'll see some lengthy clear spells developing in between the showers, and this will allow it to turn quite chilly. Most places staying frost-free, but we could see a touch of grass frost in the countryside to start Tuesday morning. But it means blue skies to start the day, with the exception of this band of showers across central and western parts of Scotland, and also the cloud thickening from the southwest as we move through the morning. The wind strengthening too as these outbreaks of rain move in, pushing also into Northern Ireland, Wales by the time we get to the afternoon. Met Office warning coming in force, 50, 60 mile an hour wind gusts possible around the Irish Sea coast. Temperatures feeling quite cool for the time of year, 13 to 15 Celsius. And into the evening time, this heavy rain pushes north and eastwards, the far north of Scotland holding on to the driest weather for longest. Very windy, particularly around this area of low pressure as it moves northeastwards. And those winds continue to stay strong through Wednesday, particularly across the southwest of the UK. Further showers Thursday and Friday, and feeling quite cool too.